I like being here with you guys. This morning I was out cutting down a tree that had died in the backyard before it fell on a building. And so I was cutting up logs and splitting wood, and I stopped that to come here. I enjoy the time I spend with you guys. You are heroes to me, and I'm not exaggerating. You're changing the world. Parents can do that from a place nobody else can. You mold your children like clay. You help them create their very notion of who they are. You're that powerful. You ever wanted a superpower? You've got one. You give them confidence, strength, happiness, or if we don't teach them, we unwittingly teach them. We're always teaching. But if we don't consciously teach them the other things, we're teaching them fear and weakness and victimhood and misery. If they don't get the positive qualities from you, they will find it very easy to find the other qualities elsewhere in the world. And they'll find it very difficult to find the positive qualities later in life. Your children, for example, will be affected by the pandemic. Psychologically speaking, more and more, I'm reading articles about how the overall sense of fear and panic is affecting everybody. Your children will be affected in large part by the way they see you handling this. If you are calm and peaceful, they will be too. Caution, naturally, there's an infection going around, but not fear. Prudence, but without an attitude of self-protection. So my hat is off to you just for being here. Come here every day for our discussion. See it twice. Share it with your kids. Many families are doing that, watching it as a family. Share it with other parents you know. Come here to ask your questions and to find people you can share yourself with, flaws and all. Last time we met, I told you the end of the story about the mom who had written a couple days before, describing her 5-year-old daughter who was becoming violent and angry and throwing things. That would be a real potential problem. And during a tantrum, mom just held that little girl. That's not the thing that normally occurs to us. The little kid is throwing things and screaming, having a tantrum. Holding them isn't our first response. She held that little girl, looked into her eyes, and gave her beams of love. Very cool. Mom wrote the same day after I talked about her the second time. In other words, right after the last time we were all together. She said, quote, "I feel a kind of confidence now I've never known, as a mother or as a person. I know I should have started this journey years ago, but I'm glad I'm finally ready. It was very hard to admit that I was not a loving parent and still feeling mostly unloved myself, but I'm ready to do the work to keep my family together." That's what I mean by you guys are heroes for coming here. This is a brave woman. Admitting that we don't know something is such an important first step. Why do we not do it then? Well, for one thing, we don't realize we don't know it. We haven't been shown a better way to do it. So most of the time we're just ignorant of our ignorance. But then sometimes we do know that we're doing something wrong. We can look at our children's faces and we can see that something's wrong, and we're stopped by shame. We're ashamed that we don't know it. Well, but I should know how to be a better mother. Really? Where would you have learned that? So I admire those of you who are learning and willing to see where you could improve. Here's somebody who writes and says, "My 9-year-old daughter came to me sad because," the next word surprised me, and I'm not often surprised when I read, "because she's a muggle." I had to stop and think, oh, right, I remember that. Although I haven't read the Harry Potter books, I saw 2 or 3 of the first movies. She said she was sad because she's a muggle, not magical like Harry Potter. In that series, I'm sure everybody in the world knows this except me, a muggle is a common person who has no magical powers. In other words, us regular people. Oh, the delicious seduction of magic. If only I had a wand. If only I could win the lottery. If only I had some superpower. Magic is so alluring because suddenly and without any effort, my life will be better. But that never works long term. Even when magic does happen, like winning the lottery. There have been studies done about people who've won the lottery, and they've discovered that the effect on somebody's happiness 5 years after winning the lottery is the same as the effect 5 years after somebody becomes a paraplegic. No kidding. Suddenly having some magical good thing happen has no effect on who you are. That's the problem, is that magic doesn't require your participation. It just goes poof, bibbidi bobbidi boo. And our desire for magic distracts us. It occupies part of our RAM. For those of you who know anything about computers, it's the part of the computer memory that's immediately accessible. It occupies our RAM, which then cannot be devoted to more useful pursuits, like how to become more loving, like how to love and teach our kids. Even the thought of magic simply distracts us and keeps us from being totally dedicated to the work we could be doing to make things happen. Magic is a sudden and dramatic change without effort, like it would result from a spell or a wand or whatever. Miracles are also dramatic changes, every bit as big as magic, but which result only after all we can do. Miracles are a result of intervention or assistance, if you like, from the divine or the universe, or whatever word you want to put to it. And it always happens after we do our part of the work. It's not like magic. It doesn't happen from a wand. Mom continues. At first, I fell for her sadness. Remember, the daughter's sad that she's a muggle. Well, what parent doesn't fall for sadness? Which is one reason that children use it, mostly unconsciously. They can see that we fall for their sadness. They say, I'm sad. And we immediately and reflexively get this look of, oh, what are you sad about on our faces? Well, what does that translate to for them? Attention. We're concerned about them. And we tend to give them attention and be concerned only when they're, sad, which perpetuates sadness, when they're hurt, which makes them victims, when they're screaming, which makes them more entitled. We tend not to give them proactive unconditional love, which is what we're talking about here on this Facebook Live. If we feel sad for them, we cannot at the same time, here's why they do it, hold them responsible for things like homework or assignments they've been given. So if a child says, oh, I'm sad, they're not going to get a lecture about responsibility, at least in that moment. So they tend to use it a lot. And then lots of sadness tends to become isolation and then becomes depressed thoughts, and then, not uncommonly at all, suicidal thoughts, which gets even more attention. All of it for the wrong reasons. So Mom says, then the sadness turned into complaining. And then I realized that I needed to stop her. So for all of you, and to the mom, why stop her? Why not just keep letting her be sad? Surely it's a good principle to say we need to let them feel their feelings. It depends. A moment of sadness I certainly wouldn't stop that. But when the sadness turns into complaining, that's not sadness. That's victimhood. That's the world ain't treating me fair. Brilliant that you stopped her, because every second that you say nothing, your child feels that silence as though you are agreeing with them. I promise you that this is true. It's what victims always do. You may not mean to agree, but you are. And I've talked about this before in a blog somewhere, that silence implies consent. Turned into Latin, it's used in courtrooms. Your friends are talking about robbing a bank, for example, and you're not talking about robbing the bank, but they can see that you hear them talking about robbing the bank and you don't say anything. Instead, you just wait down the street for them just to see what happens. Without meaning to, your silence gave assent. You just agreed to the robbery and very likely will be convicted for conspiracy for being silent. Mom said, I told her to get me the Harry Potter book. That was an interesting answer. I held it and I asked her, is this book bringing you happiness right now or complaining? And my daughter said, well, because the daughter could see she was trapped. It's a clever move on Mom's part. She said, well, right now, I guess complaining. And her face sobered up. I asked if she wanted to be happy or sad. This is brilliant on the part of the mom. All right, so here's the Harry Potter book. Is it making you happy or sad? Not saying the Harry Potter book is good or bad. No, just in this moment, is it making you happy or sad? Well, sad. So what do you want to be? Do you want to stay sad or do you want to be happy? She said, I want to be happy. I'm not sure if I did that right, the mom says. Better than right. You were brilliant. Mom says, I was going to keep the book if she stayed sulky because her just being sad had changed into complaining and sulking. Maybe keep the book or leave the choice with her. Remember, you said to her, do you want to be happy or sad? And she said happy. Maybe she'll put it aside. The solution wasn't keeping or not keeping the book, although your using the book was brilliant. The solution was you loving her and listening to her and paying attention to her. This is really brilliant. So everybody listen to this. You listen to her being sad. That's real. That's genuine love. And then you noticed that the sadness turned into whining, complaining, and victimhood and went, that's not good for her. Being sad just happens sometimes. You hear about somebody who died and you're sad. You see a dog in the middle of the road who was run over by a car. You feel sad. In fact, sad is one of the few pure emotions that isn't intended to get something if it's brief and depends on the context. But that's why we tend to fall for sadness. Your solution was the love, not the book. You did a brilliant thing. Mom says, it's her choice completely to feel sorry for herself for not being magical, right? Kind of. Before you learned how to love her unconditionally, she had no choices at all. She had no choice about feeling sorry for herself or, frankly, feeling anything, good or bad. Everything she did was just a reaction to pain before she experienced love. That's the only choice we've got, is just to feel pain and react to it. But now her ability to choose how she sees things and how she feels is growing. It's growing daily as you love her. But she's still affected to some extent by past pain, which is why she went from sad, which very likely was a pure emotion. I mean, of course a child feels a little sad that they don't have a magical power. Who wouldn't want one? If somebody offered me one, I would want a magical power. So it's understandable that she would feel a little sad, but then Mom paid attention and it turned into something other than sad. And that's from past pain. Mom says, what should I have said to show her better that she can be happy just imagining being magic? Maybe just for a bit. Is it because her real life is still not loved enough that she wants to be something that she's not? That's actually quite imaginative on your part. So yeah, you could say something like, because this is just more of the kind of listening that you're already doing. I'm not correcting a thing. You're doing a great job. But if you wanted to do more, you could say, oh, yeah, I've done this with my grandkids before. Would it not be cool to be able to fill in the blank? Uh, Fly. That's a favorite. That's a thing that people dream about. Fly. Um, just have money rain from the skies, to be able to heal people. Yeah, wouldn't it be cool? Yeah. Because if we had magical powers, we could do this and we could do that. This is you talking to your daughter. So until we get magical powers, what could we do? Like right now, because you said you wanted to be happy, not sad. What could we do? And you could say what you suggested about the desire for magic coming from insufficient love, perhaps. So how about if we just sit here and you sit on my lap and I'll just hold you? You were a parenting grandmaster in this example. No kidding. Grandmaster is a term that comes from chess, the game. Mom says, maybe I needed to show her how good her present life is. Well, honey, you're answering your own question beautifully in about 8 different ways. Yeah, you could do that. Making a gratitude list for what you do have. Okay, I'm a muggle. I presently am a muggle. I don't have magical powers. But what do I have? I don't have a magic wand. I can't play whatever the name of that game is where you run around on a broomstick and throw a ball through a hoop. It's going to come to me, of course, later. Making a list of the things we're grateful for is almost always a useful tool. Why? It's impossible to be grateful and unhappy at the same time. So you've answered your own question beautifully. You dealt with your daughter's sadness in several different ways. All of them good. Good lesson for all of us. As you interact with your children, keep remembering what this mother's demonstrated partly to all of us. You're not looking for a solution to stop a particular behavior. That tends to be what we do. A child is crying. What can we do to stop the crying? What you're really looking for is to eliminate the root cause of the behavior, like whining. Everybody knows what whining sounds like. I am not going to make the noise. It's annoying even when you're pretending. If your goal is to eliminate whining, oh, well, there's lots of ways to make that happen. You could just, I don't know, beat them till they're unconscious. Then there's no whining. You could tie them up, duct tape their mouth, put them in a soundproof room. But see, none of those makes any sense because that's just stopping the whining. That's not the goal. The goal is to eliminate the pain and often the ignorance that leads to whining. The mother who has a daughter who's a muggle stopped her daughter who went from sadness to complaining, whining, by doing lots of things, reminding her of what she does have, asking her what she does want to be in her life, happy or sad. Listen to them. Listen to them. Love them. Listening is loving. Require that they speak when they're whining, when they're speaking the language called whine, that they speak in English and tell you what they're unhappy about. Love and teach them in any number of the many ways that we've talked about in these daily conversations so far. All indispensable. You can't do loving without teaching, not with a child. With a partner, it's a different thing. With a child, if you only what they call love, it's not. If you only give, if you only try to put a smile on their face, well, then you give them the treatment that I talked about before. M&Ms and vodka, that'll make every kid smile. But that's not the goal. If you only teach, it turns into lecturing and they don't feel loved. That's why it's one word. We love and teach them all the time. You can't do one without the other. And it's not truly loving without the teaching. Since you're the parent, that's your job. And there can't ever be anger from us. Not ever. Why? Because it eliminates the loving, which then, of course, makes the teaching impossible. And now loving and teaching are clearly out of reach. In the last Facebook Live, I read a message from a mother who says that she and her family gather around and talk about these daily conversations. She asked how two children in the household can turn out so differently. And certainly there are genetic factors at work, but more important are the factors in the home. We talked about those. Depending on genetics some, and a lot on birth order and the way we treat them, the way we trade imitation love with them, children simply learn different survival skills in the absence of real love. If they have real love, they don't need to trade. The skills they learn tend to persist throughout their lives and determine what kind of adults they'll be. That mother, I was just reviewing the answer I gave, I think, last time. The mother wrote the same evening, and she said, I've got a mouth full of popcorn. She's a poet. I love it. I've got a mouthful of popcorn and a heart full of gratitude as I watch your video chat response. The discussion opened my eyes to what really matters for kids. Love is what matters. Yeah, like far and away. She continues, not praise or approval or accomplishment. Now, about favoritism in my own childhood. Because, see, I get to talk all day long to adults who don't understand how they turned out the way they did because they thought their childhoods were normal. So now here's this woman, an adult, because she has kids, says, now I'm beginning to understand the favoritism in my own childhood. I had always thought of myself as the weaker sibling compared to my sister, who was more accomplished. You know, I was always sort of the little tag along behind the big sister who could do everything, and I was less than. But I'm beginning to think now that my sister just played better into the high-strung drama that my mother craved. Bingo! Your sister was born first. She saw that your mother just loves drama, excitement, bring it on, enact a play in front of mom all day long, and mom will pay you more attention. And then this mother concludes, which gave my mother a role and gave my sister more attention. Yeah, you've got it. Everybody out there listening to the sound of my voice right now can learn from what we're talking about right now. We tend to compare ourselves to other kids in other families. We compare ourselves to kids in our own families, and we think, well, I just wasn't as good as them. I wasn't as important as them. They didn't love me as much. No, it's all about the trade. A sibling gets there first. They can claim any position in the family they want. They want to be the good and golden child. They get to do that. They want to be the rebel. They get to claim that. But they're going to have done it for 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 years longer than you before you're born, or perhaps you. Well, that role's taken. So you don't get to try that role. You're just not good enough at it. So your sister got there first, speaking to the lady who's writing. So she figured out what behaviors from her would more likely result in your mother smiling. And when you were born, you couldn't compete. So you learned other survival skills, which on the surface, at least to your mom, were not as desirable, nor perhaps as externally successful in the world. That's all. You were never less worthwhile than your sister. But from your mother's response, you would have thought so. I don't know anybody who couldn't benefit from what I just said. Nobody. I know a little boy who was born into a musical family. His parents were musical. His brothers were musical. I mean, like crazy musical, really unusually talented. He didn't know what else to do except to at least try to be even better than they were. Most children will at least try to compete with their older siblings. They usually fail because they're younger and just less experienced. But this kid tried. And so he didn't just try to be more musical. He was louder and more dramatic. And he succeeded. And his name was Michael Jackson. That's what happened with him. Some of us succeed in doing the thing that our parents reward us for, and some people fail. His efforts to survive also happened to be socially desirable. So he exploded onto the stage of fame. popularity. But was he happy? He learned to survive emotionally, kind of, barely, maybe. But he died from a drug overdose. He died alone and unhappy and going in and out of courtrooms. He could just as easily have given up early in life, even competing for that kind of attention, like his brothers were getting on stage, and done something entirely different. In our day, he could have become somebody living in his mother's basement playing video games, for example. Now, why do I tell you the story of Michael Jackson? Because what's the difference between Michael Jackson and a kid on a couch eating Cheetos and playing video games? They're both just trying to survive. One just happened to have an incredible musical gift, and it worked. And people clapped for him, even though a great number of people already knew that he was miserable. The kid on the couch, not a lot of fame to be gained from eating Cheetos on the couch. So one looks successful, the other doesn't. They both failed at living. They both survived, but they're not alive. Not really. This mother continues, I haven't wanted to admit that I've treated my own kids differently too, just like my mother treated me and my sister differently. That's a little embarrassing, but I have treated my kids differently. The truth is that they're each worth loving with their own strengths and gifts, and they deserve to be treated that way. If you were here, I'd kiss your forehead. Yes, they do. Anybody who says they love their children the same is lying, because they're different. They need to be loved differently, but they need to be loved according to their gifts and abilities. They each need to be loved enough, but to say we love them the same, no. It's tough stuff to see, but look how free you feel admitting that you became different in response to the way that your mother treated you, that you've treated your kids differently, and now you can begin to make different choices with them and with yourself. Freedom in life can be found only after climbing the walls and the barbed wire put in place early in our lives by other people. We didn't do it. How many people just cry right before this little segment began? I got an email from a woman who says, I've got a gun to my head and I feel like I want to just pull the trigger and kill myself. Why? Because she feels completely hemmed in by life, by walls and barbed wire. She feels like there's nowhere to go without being stabbed by the razor wire. Walls created by disapproval, pain, withdrawal of love. It's miserable. And the walls close in, and eventually the barbed wire stabs you even if you're not moving. Most of us don't see the walls, or we genuinely believe that the walls can't be moved. So we don't even try. Some of us try to climb the walls. The walls of being a parent, for example. But when it becomes difficult, or we're cut by those little pieces of metal on the barbed wire or razor wire, if we're cut by the truth even, we reflexively back away. Well, now we'll never climb the wall. But a few of us, regrettably a very few, see the walls like this mother who wrote to me. She sees the walls that were created by her mother. We see them, we climb them, and we endure the exertion and the wire cuts, and then we're free. I was just out cutting wood in the backyard, and I got myself caught in a bunch of brambles, and no matter which way I moved, there were some thorns that were going to poke me. Well, I could still be out there crying about it, or just start moving and minimize the cuts as much as I could, and I'll be darned, I got out. It's worth the climb. It's worth freeing ourselves from the barbed wire and the thorns and the thistles and the things that keep us in prison. Learning ridiculously effective parenting can be like putting together a puzzle. Let's say that you've put together 500 pieces, and it's obvious that you don't have enough pieces to finish the puzzle. It's kind of obvious, in fact, looking at it, that it's a 1,000-piece puzzle and you've got 500 pieces. That happens. Puzzles get put away wrong and somebody didn't put all the pieces away. So you've got a half-finished puzzle. For those of you who put together a puzzle halfway, you just can't stop because it looks like nothing. It's worse looking than the tabletop alone was. And you certainly can't pick it up and put it on a wall. You can't say, wow, isn't that a beautiful picture? Half-finished puzzles just look awful. Then you pick up one piece that doesn't seem to fit anywhere. You look at all the pieces, and this piece just don't fit. And you notice on the back of the piece of the puzzle that there is printed the letter B. So you go, that's weird. I've never seen that on the back of a puzzle piece. So you start to turn over the pieces of your puzzle, the 500 pieces you have, and they're all of them printed with the letter A. Well, puzzle A is obviously incomplete. You will never get it put together. If you have 500 out of 1,000 pieces, it doesn't matter how clever you are, that is not going to happen. And then somebody points over there on the shelf, and there's a puzzle box that's labeled A. Or, sorry, B, like the one piece you have. I get mixed up. So there's a box labeled with the letter B, just like the one odd piece that you couldn't fit into your puzzle. So you open up the box B and you discover that the pieces there are an entirely different shape. In fact, they're even three-dimensional. And it takes you a while to get used to that. It's weird. It's different. But you keep going, and sure enough, there are 1,000 pieces, and the puzzle does fit together. And it's gorgeous. In fact, it's the most beautiful puzzle you've ever put together. Not just because it's three-dimensional, but just the picture's beautiful. But in the beginning, when you just had one piece, it was pretty weird. And when you just dumped the box out, it was still pretty weird. And that's often how effective parenting can be. Certainly ridiculously effective parenting training can be. You've already proven that the parenting puzzle you're using doesn't work. Although some people accept their 500 pieces out of 1,000 as normal because they look around and they don't see a better option. They don't see anybody else who's put a puzzle together. So they just keep rearranging the 500 pieces. But then you go to reallove.com or realloveparents.com, or you come to this Loving Parents Live on Facebook, and you find a piece of the puzzle B, the new puzzle. Most people just throw it away. They do. They sign on to the Facebook Live and go, what in the world is he talking about? And just move on to videos of cats playing with whatever. Because it doesn't fit in their familiar puzzle. Oh, how we like what's familiar, even if it's awful. Even though that puzzle isn't working. If your familiar puzzle, puzzle A, is filled with fear, anger, criticism, the usual protecting behaviors, then if the new piece from puzzle B is love, it just doesn't fit in with fear, anger, and criticism and all that other stuff and victimhood, and most people just pitch it. It's interesting, the new piece, sometimes shiny, sometimes we keep it in our pocket and go, weird. But it doesn't fit with what's familiar, so we don't use it. It turns out that puzzle B is the only puzzle that works. It's the only puzzle I know of to teach children and to love them. If somebody has a better way, I have yet to see it. But you don't know that in the beginning. So what's the solution? Most people stay with the impossible puzzle. They do. By far most people, which is why, to me, you who are here are heroes. You could be doing anything else. You could be watching cat videos. You're putting a lot into this. just like you've put a lot into parenting the old way, but it hasn't worked and never will. Some people even say, well, I don't have the time to do it. You don't have time to raise the children you brought into the world. I can't afford the training. Goodness, you can come to these. These are free. And we've provided thousands of hours of reading and viewing on reallove.com. You can go to the Master Index and look up hundreds of references to parenting. And if you do decide to do the full parenting training, yes, that does require some expense because it required a great deal of expense to create it. But it's like less than 2 car payments. In the long run, learning to be a loving and effective parent is not expensive. It's not. It's cheaper than a child in drug rehab or living at home all their lives or addicted to porn or otherwise just miserable. What would you give, I sometimes ask parents, to help your child be happy? Most parents say anything. But then what they do next proves that what they said is not true. It helps to remember that our old ways have not worked. Or to ask, what are our children worth? Would you fix your broken air conditioner or car? Sure. Like immediately, we just take it into the shop and we have it fixed. Which is more valuable, our air conditioner or our car or our child? And with some parents and with some children, it would be understandable to choose the air conditioner. I get it. I do. But we have these kids. We brought them into the world, and we owe them the best we've got. Arthur Miller said, no one wants the truth if it's inconvenient. Dennis Diderot said, we swallow with one gulp the lie that flatters us, and we drink drop by drop the truth which is bitter to us. In other words, nobody likes to hear that we haven't parented in a way that produces happy children. Another man said, the truth that makes men free is for the most part the truth that men prefer not to hear. And last, the truth is like a shiny rock that we notice in the bed of a flowing river. We pick it up, we admire it, we put it in our pocket, but we soon throw it back into the river. Can't tell you how much I admire those of you who are here picking up the rock and deciding what to do with it, picking up the puzzle piece and saying, where's the next one? Determined to raise children who are happy. One more. Huh? Really? Okay. We're going to wrap it up because I was instructed by my boss to wrap it up. So we're going to be here tomorrow. We're going to start with new subjects, new questions from you. Please send them. Post them on the Loving Parents Live Facebook page. And I may not get to your question like the same day that you send it, but I'll get to it within a day or two. And keep doing everything that you can to learn how to love and teach your children. It's worth it. We'll see you then.